This is a Film Stories original podcast. We made this.
Welcome to the Starlight Ballroom. Hey!
Hello and welcome to Shipwrecked and Comatose, the podcast about Red Dwarf here on the We Made This Podcast network. Well, it's almost Shipwrecked and Comatose because it is our 5th anniversary special for our podcast network, the We Made This Podcast network. And we are doing crossover episodes in January. I'm Mark, and I am your regular host, and with me at this time is my regular co-host, Carl Bryan. Hello, Carl.
Hello, Mark.
But it's not just you and me, Carl. We are crossing over with You Have Been Watching. So we are being joined by the hosts of that marvellous podcast about British sitcoms. Right, it's not a tenuous link, it's an actual link this time. We've got Rob Turnbull and Alex Lynch. Hello, Rob, and hello, Alex.
Hello.
Hello.
We were both too polite to say hello at the same time there.
We were, yes.
Yeah, but I think by authority, Alex, I get to say hello first.
I'd agree with that.
That's the way it works.
You've already been on before, Rob. You've done like 2 episodes.
I've done a couple now. Before. Yes, I am. I'm practically in fact, I should be the host of you. I'm taking over. This is a takeover bid now.
That's less effort for me. You go, girl.
Yeah, no, I don't want the extra commitment. But thank you for teaming up with us. Thank you for letting us invade your space.
Yes, thanks.
So, Mark and Carl, for any of the You Have Been Watching listeners that don't know your podcast, you just briefly let us know what it is that you do, if you can, in a brief moment.
It's about Red Dwarf.
It's a big, wide array of everything that's ever been done or interlinked with any of the cast or makers of Red Dwarf. Occasionally, we talk about an episode of Red Dwarf in there somewhere as well.
To be fair, that is pretty accurate. We've had some tenuous links. I don't think this is particularly tenuous, though. It's written by the same blokes.
This is I mean, it's like, your podcast, it's like having tenuous connections to Red Dwarf is probably the most Red Dwarf thing you could actually do in a Red Dwarf podcast. I'm sure there's a lot of crossover between our listeners, but genuinely, if you've not listened to it, go and listen to it. It's really, really good fun. Where are you now? You're just past Back to Earth. In terms of actual Red Dwarf, I know you don't enjoy talking about Red Dwarf that much, but in terms of actual Red Dwarf, you've just gone past Back to Earth, haven't you?
Yeah, we're just, at the moment, while we're recording this, we're actually recording our coverage of Series 10, Series X, and that's coming, all being well, in, I want to say February, maybe March. I'm not going to promise February.
Play it safe.
Yeah. But we're halfway through that recording kind of block, and the podcast has changed in as much as up until Series 8, all of us had a huge working knowledge of the BBC's Red Dwarf, whereas 2 of our hosts now, myself and Colin, hadn't watched any of the Dave stuff. So there's going to be an interesting dynamic change, I think, because I knew loads of shit and now I know fuck all.
That's quite fun and exciting, though.
It is.
I like that. It's a bit exciting when you get to watch something fresh, even if it's a bit old.
Well, even though it's 10 years old, it's like new Dwarf to me. And
shit, it is 10 years old, isn't it?
Oh
It's great. Fucking hell. Yeah. Oh my God. I mean, I love name dropping this, but I worked on the Dave comeback, Back to Earth, the first one. And I've realized that's a long time ago now. Like career wise, it's like, that's a long time ago.
That's mad. I mean, wasn't it also, it was like Dave's first exclusive number, wasn't it?
It was their first exclusive. It's like, I mean, that's a whole other story that we won't get into now. Yeah. But that show was not, what you got was not what it was originally intended to be. And it switched up everything for Dave. You know, mostly for the better, I think, in terms of their viewers. So what I'm saying is that it's thanks to me that Dave is a success. That's what I'm really saying. Yeah.
They should have called it Rob.
They should have done.
But then Doug wouldn't have liked that. So that would have been difficult. That would have been awkward.
Right, let's flip it around and tell the Shipwrecked and Comatose listeners, if they've not listened to You Have Been Watching, what's your vibes?
We are all things British sitcom. So until very recently, it was myself and Tony Black. So if you go back and listen to our back catalogue, is a different co-host to Alex. Tony, as regular listeners know, dumped me like a piece of wet trash when he got a family. You know, how selfish.
Dare he?
How selfish. I've got twice as many kids as he does, and I'm still watching shitty old sitcoms.
Don't worry, I've bitched about him so many times on our podcast. He doesn't listen to us. He don't want to. He knows how much of a maverick I am.
He doesn't listen to us anymore, so it's fine. He's lost all interest thanks to his family. But yeah, so we talk about British sitcom, and that's our kind of thing. And we try to cover the gamut. So we talk about new stuff. When I say new stuff, it's like The Office, 20 years old. But we talk about newer stuff. We talk about older stuff. We try and find some of the weird and wonderful. One of our earliest episodes was Paris, which hardly anyone remembers. But we're quite right.
I remember Paris.
Yeah, it's like
Of course you do, Carl. You remember any tat?
And it is proper tat. It's proper tat. Alex has recently joined me as new co-host, and we've recorded a couple of episodes already. We've got some really exciting stuff coming up. But that's our thing. We talk about British sitcom, everything to do with it, and we try and do as much of a deep dive. Tony and I, as Alex and I, are both like massive sitcom fans, British sitcom. So it's really fun. We've not talked about Red Dwarf, obviously, because you guys sort of have that covered, but we might try and do one in the future just to touch base on it. But that's us. That's our vibe. That's who we are.
Have you done Ain't Misbehaving with Doctor Who in it?
We have not done Ain't Misbehaving. No.
Do you know Ain't Misbehaving?
No, Ain't Misbehaving. Yes, Ain't Misbehaving. A few others like So Haunt Me, which we're going to try and do a few of those.
So
those
Haunt
are the kind
Me.
Yeah, these are the kind of ones you're describing exactly the kind of stuff. We don't do Only Fools and Horses. Everyone does Only Fools and Horses. We're looking for the Ain't Misbehavings. We're looking for the So Haunt Me's. We're looking for the stuff that wasn't terrible, but nobody remembers.
Yeah.
A little bit like the 10%ers.
So I watched Ain't Misbehaving because it had Peter Davison, who was Doctor Who, in it, and it was cack. I then watched series 2 of Ain't Misbehaving because it still had Peter Davison in it, who was Doctor Who, and I wasn't that surprised when it was cack.
This is something that we talk about a lot on the show, or at least I do, because I'm old. There was a time in British television, Alex is a young spring chicken compared to me. There was a time in British television where we just watched what was on. And that was it. And I'm exactly the same. Like Ain't Misbehaving, it's like, even, So Haunt Me, which is stuck in my head now that I've said it once. These kind of sitcoms it was all right. It was okay. It should have been Maureen Lipman. In the main role, but it was all right. But these are the things we watched sitcoms that weren't great. I watched Mulberry, that was shit. But we watched these sitcoms that weren't great because they were on, and that's what you did.
I definitely do fit into that category. I know, you say I'm that much younger than you, but not. I still, I'm the sort of last generation before social media and streaming and everything. So I was, when I was a kid, watching what was on Channel 4 or BBC 2 or, whichever. And then
Channel 4. Oh dear, you didn't watch the pirate one with Craig Charles in, did you?
Oh, Captain Butler.
Oh no, I didn't. No,
diabolical.
What? Oh no,
it's a class. It's it, but again, it's I'm sorry. I sound like I'm desperately trying to bring us back to the subject matter. It's not deliberate. But Captain Butler.
It's a podcast. You don't need to do that.
Yeah, that's one I watched. I watched it entirely because Craig Charles was in it, obviously, because I'm a Red Dwarf fan. You watch it, like you're saying about, Peter Davison. We would watch shows just because a person was in it, with this sort of mad loyalty. And you'd be inside knowing that Captain Butler was bad, but you're going,
really
but
bad.
It's Craig Charles. And Craig Charles is great in Red Dwarf. And oh, look, Robert Llewellyn's in an episode. Oh, yes. But it's like, not good. It's not good. That's maybe one we'll talk about. Because you didn't, Alex, you say you haven't seen Captain Butler.
No, I haven't seen Captain Butler.
It's shit, but we'll talk about it.
I
you watch it.
I remember a lot of the, the Comedy Lab pilots.
Yes.
Oh god, there was that one with Armstrong and Miller as two detectives. I can't remember what it was called now, but there was they kind of had. There's one called The Function Room, which was Kevin Eldon and Daniel Rigby and a whole load of people, and it was like with audience laughter. It didn't work, but it was just what goes on in like a pub function room. It sounds
like Peter Kay, but
yeah,
soulless.
Much, but
So
Not that I'm suggesting that Peter Kay has a soul.
He does not have a soul.
Yeah.
The other one we want to look at is Mama's Back, which is one of those pilots. And it was directed by Ed Bye, and it had Alexis from Dynasty. What was her name?
Joan Collins.
Thank you. It had Joan Collins in it, and
Oh
I'm
my
in for
God.
anything with Joan fucking Collins. Get it in front
Oh,
of me.
wow.
You need to hand in your gay card right now, Mark.
What do you mean?
You forgot who Joan Collins was.
You did
Oh, I
forget
know, but I
Joan
love
Collins
her.
was.
Yeah.
No, but I love her. And the best thing in Dynasty was when she had a fight with Sequins with the other one, whose name I can't remember. They fucking
Linda
threw
Evans.
Sequins at each other in a haberdashery. It was great.
That was Linda Evans, wasn't it? And I'm not
Probably.
gay. How the hell do I know that? But
There's so many gays these days we rub off on you all. Not in the rude way, obviously, because that wouldn't be consensual.
I was going to actually go back to the pilots. There was a show on BBC Two a few years ago about like the sort of lost pilots, like the sort of archive of lost pilots. And did you know there was one? Madness had a pilot, a sitcom pilot.
What, Madness as in the band?
Yeah, it's in the
Suggs.
band. Yeah. They had a sitcom pilot which looked utterly terrible, but also at the same time kind of brilliant. Like,
I did hear about this. I never saw any footage. I think he got mentioned in that documentary they did.
they did show some footage.
Yeah.
It's it's as you would expect.
So look, we let's bring it back to good old Grant Naylor for the 10%ers.
Yes.
Oh shit, yeah, 15 minutes in.
15 minutes in, yeah. Well, that's it, isn't it? It's like today it would be the 15%ers.
It's warm up. It's warm up.
It's warm up. Yeah, this is all going. Don't worry about it. It's just going to be me saying hello, and then I'm just going to cut everyone else out. It's just going
I
to be
will
my
be so
views and
cross.
opinions.
I said some funny shit. Don't cut me.
I'll leave all the punchlines in, but take all the lead up. So it'll sound like completely insane. But we're going to talk today. So just to specify, we're not going to talk about the main series itself because, for one, that's a lot of episodes that we haven't sort of watched or rewatched for this. Also because it's actually Rob Grant and Doug Naylor only wrote the pilot together. So the main series, it had 2 series, this show, amazingly.
Really?
And the actual main series of it, Doug wrote with other writers. Rob was,
That does scan, actually, because I did look this up. It was broadcast in 1993, so it was between Series 5 and Series 6 of Red Dwarf.
Yes.
And after Series 6, that was when they fell out.
It was,
So that
yeah.
does scan that if there was a pause between the pilot and then Series 1, they would have fallen out during that time period, just after Series 6 of Red Dwarf.
Yeah, absolutely. And in terms of production and broadcast of the pilot, there was quite a gap because it was like pilot was 93, full series started in 94. So it all tracks. It all tracks in the tempestuous relationship of Rob and Doug.
Shame, really.
It is kind of, it's a shame. It's like, cause I think that a lot of their best work was work that they did together. And I think that Doug's done some good stuff, by himself. I don't think that he's like lost without Rob, but definitely, their work together and also friendships like that. It's sad to see them fall apart.
Yeah.
I think there were, I'm not going to get into the nitty gritty of being on set with various people. I think there's a lot more to it, but
Do you have insider goss? Oh, Sharesies after
a tiny bit.
Robert's always got
goss.
insider goss.
Tiny
not
bit
the
of insider
Sharesies.
goss.
Not while
that
we're
I won't say
recording,
on
but
the record. But so this is the pilot. Came out in 93, and it was written by both Rob and Doug. And it is for anyone who's not seen it, which might be a lot of people. It's about a theatrical agency, and it's basically the machinations of them trying to get the best deal for their clients. Everything going wrong in hilarious comic fashion. You've got Clive Francis, Benedict Taylor are in it. Elizabeth Bennett are in the main cast. Clive Francis is kind of like the top guy at the agency. I don't know what kind of agency it is because they cover everything. Which is a little bit unusual. Yeah, they have like music clients and they have theatre clients and they have stage clients. It's a bit vague, but I think it's a sort of it's a general theatrical agency that they make a lot of money. and are very rich, and they can have any kind of client for any kind of hilarious situation.
Yeah.
But I guess the first question to everyone is, had you watched it? Did you watch it at the time? What was your relationship with it? Alex, my regular co-host, I'll ask you first then. So had you seen this before we decided to do this?
No, I hadn't. And it's interesting because the beginning of it does not sort of match with the rest of the show.
Yeah.
Like I watched the beginning and I was like, what is this? I'm not really into this. And the audience laughter doesn't work, particularly in that scene, but generally I just don't think it really works in. And I know this was a time when there were more shows that did have audience laughter than not, but I feel like they could have kind of phased it out a bit with this one. But the rest of the show is really funny. I thought the rest of the show was very funny. I think it got better as it went along, but I was not aware of it at all. It's interesting how it's decades before Call My Agent, which feels like the kind of main show about theatrical agents. But what I love about Call My Agent, which I wish the 10%ers had done, was I wish they had got the real actors in as themselves rather than fake actors. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that was done really well with extras, wasn't it, for example?
Yeah, I think doing that, if you're doing a theatrical agency, it would have been funny to get the actors of the time. So when was this? Was this early 90s?
Mid-90s.
Yeah. Mid-90s. So who, I can't think off the top of my head who would have been.
Clive Owen.
Yeah.
Jimmy Nesbitt.
Yeah, Jimmy
Nail.
Nail.
That's a good one.
Oof.
Jimmy Nail. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
Patsy
I think,
Kensit.
Yes. Oh god,
She'd have
yeah.
been a good one.
So I think they should have done something like that rather than the sort of fake characters.
Because I imagine this would not have had a very big budget. That's the other, because it's ITV as well. They don't put any money into comedy.
It's true.
Then or now. But you're right. I think that's the biggest the biggest failing is the kind of the pretend actors, which are never quite as fun as real actors.
Well, it's also because they're referencing real things as well. So it's a bit odd having fake actors we've never heard of referencing real shows that exist or something.
Yeah.
I quite like the little joke, the woman who gets arrested. I can't remember the characters' names at all, but the woman who gets arrested for shoplifting, and then she sort of like is worried she's going to wind up on an unfunny sketch in Spitting Image.
Yeah.
Which I like, especially as that comes from Grant and Naylor. That's a nice little nod there.
Responsible for so many unfunny sketches.
Exactly, yeah.
Carl, what about you? Did you watch this at the time, or was this fresh for you?
I do remember watching this at the time because I very much was a person who, like you say, you watch it because it was on.
Yeah.
And say growing up, I grew up in a shop, so there wasn't much time for sort of going out and things. So for family time for us was sitting around the TV, and that's where I first encountered Red Dwarf, and that's where I encountered a lot of these sitcoms. So yeah, for me, this did spring memories. A lot of it was the character of Atin just being just this over the top 90s with the t-shirt with the blazer and the jeans, the trousers pulled up to the nipples. Just that kind of thing. It did remind me a lot of sort of watching TV back in the day. So I remember watching this. I don't remember watching the pilot, but then I realised, because I skipped forward a couple of episodes, that the pilot gets rejigged when it gets made into a series to the last episode of the first series.
Oh, does it? Good grief.
Yeah, it gets completely reshot with a couple of different characters get changed, but the general gist of it is there.
Oh, no way.
I mean, I haven't seen any of it other than this episode, and the only reason I watched it is because it has a Red Dwarf link. And it really does seem like it's got a lot of fun potential, and I would like to watch the rest of it. But I'm not a fan of LOL suicide, if I'm being very honest with you. That made my skin crawl. Really made my skin crawl. I've lost a lot of friends to suicide, and LOL suicide just isn't funny to me.
I had forgotten about that, actually. A bit like Carl, I kind of watched it because it was on back in the day, and I watched it because it was the Red Dwarf guys. So I watched it quite loyally. I genuinely couldn't remember anything about it going into this, other than the general premise and a couple of the actors. And my memory of it from like 20 years ago was that it was basically a bit shit. I'd completely compartmentalised it. It was one of those sitcoms that I watched because it was the Red Dwarf guys, but it was a bit shit, like Captain Butler. Watched this pilot episode rather, and it was a lot funnier than I thought, a lot sharper than I remembered it being. But I know what you mean, and with the suicide part of it, I was surprised at how dark it was. I had no memory of it being this dark as a sitcom.
It's really dark.
It's really dark, and like the stabbing and the bleeding, and the sort of the suicide part of it. So yeah,
I'll be honest.
It's weird.
I'll be honest. The wife is pretty fucking abusive, actually. Manipulative,
well, yeah, that's
gaslighty.
The thing, isn't it? It's like,
not great.
Again, it's what was sort of seen funny at the time. It's like, we talk a lot about how things stand the test of time, the context of when things were made. It's that weird thing that, like, he gets hit by a wok in that opening scene, and
that's domestic violence.
It is domestic violence, but it's done with a big clonk comedy sound effect. And I think that at the time, it's that kind of, that almost Tom and Jerry violence. People didn't really think about it. They didn't think about the ramifications of what it might mean.
Well, even like where she takes the statue onto the bridge and then drops it onto the car.
Yeah.
Like it goes through the roof.
Like a proper murder attempt.
I mean, the thing is, though, that's what I kind of meant about like how that whole scene at the beginning does not kind of go with the rest of it, because the other, I don't know, like that kind of slapstick violence at the beginning, and then there isn't really any of that until the end, and that's not even slapstick when he gets stabbed. He just gets stabbed.
Yeah, and I think it's odd to me, the whole domestic violence thing that we're talking about, because this is, directed by... Is it directed by Ed Bye?
I think it was Ed Bye, wasn't it?
Yeah, so if it was directed by Ed Bye, he directed Bottom. And obviously there's a huge amount of slapstick violence in that, but that is caricatured violence, and that is... It's two friends, it's two equal kind of people. There's no kind of romantic dynamic. And maybe that's why I didn't like this, even though it was very similar to Bottom in style, because it's a relationship. And without going too far into it, I have been in a relationship that got abusive like that. And I don't see any problem with Bottom whatsoever. In fact, I fucking love the slapstick in Bottom. And I've always enjoyed slapstick. But for me, I guess it just touched a nerve a little bit.
That's fair. Yeah. I mean, it's like, that's a horrible thing to experience. And it's shitty that even something as silly as this, like a 20-year-old sitcom, has kind of like touched that for you.
I'll be fine. I mention it because I'm okay.
And that's the important thing. What you're saying about the Bottom comparisons, genuinely, I think, and Alex, what you're saying about how it doesn't match up, I think if the whole episode had maintained that level of Tom and Jerry violence, a la Bottom, I don't think it would jar so much. I don't think it would feel so aggressive. But because it's this opening scene that is really, really aggressive, I think it's a very Rob and Doug thing, which I would argue that Doug has kind of evolved from, because it isn't, it's 20 odd years ago. This, people do gain different understandings of things, become more sensitive to things, and they maybe wouldn't make the same choices. I think it's the sort of joke where they think it's okay because it's a woman doing it to a man. I think that's 100%. They would never open a sitcom episode with a man smacking a woman in the face with a wok. They would never do that. And I think it's just because they think it's okay because he can take it.
Well, that was the thing in the 90s, wasn't it? It was always funny if a man was being physically abused in a relationship, but it was just as bad as it is now if it was a man doing it to a woman. And no one even really thought about the gays. So, it is actually absolutely indicative of the time. And it's fucking grim, because it wasn't cool then and it isn't cool now.
Yeah. Although the sound effect was really funny.
It fucking was. I'm not saying it wasn't. It's just...
Well, I mean, by this point, we'd had 2 series of Bottom. We'd also had Vic and Bob. And I think Shooting Stars was this year as well. And the thing I got from this pilot is, one, it is a pilot. And in the 23 minutes that they put in there, they are throwing everything to get a series.
Feels like that, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's their... I think because that initial bit is almost like a sketch, because there's the whole thing of it's physically impossible for her to beat the car to the bridge with a statue. It's very cartoony, and I think that's one of the things they threw in there. Like the suicide thing, that is, it's a product of the time, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's, he's super depressed, and therefore he's, going to kill himself, and, just for the reveal of... I mean, if you look at it in like a future thing, you've got... Jojo Rabbit did a very similar thing with Scarlett Johansson, and that was a very, very emotional scene. In this. It's almost the exact same gag, for lack of a word, and it's played for laughs.
Yeah.
It's very much a sort of zeitgeisty thing, that bit. The being stabbed, I actually thought was quite funny, just because of the main actor's delivery of the sort of thing. I went to watch, as I say, I watched the re-edited one. You don't see him get stabbed. He does the thing of, what are you going to do? Stab me? And then it cuts to somebody coming to his office door, his wife storming out, and him coming out 2 seconds later. She stabbed me. And yeah, so
really?
Yeah, it's but it's with the Statue of Liberty statue.
Yeah.
In an attempt to make it funny. Yeah.
But I think you've kind of nailed it in terms of this being a pilot, and what you're saying as well, Alex, about it being sketchy. Is that you're right? They're basically throwing in anything to get a particular audience. And I think that opening sequence, the comic book violence, regardless of the subject of it being in poor taste, like they're going, okay, so if this is the most popular bit, this is the show we make.
Yeah.
And then the comedy suicide at the end, that's very kind of Channel 4 Nightingale's kind of dark comedy. I think again, they're going, if this is the bit people like, that's the sitcom we make. And then somewhere in the middle, you've got a kind of a frothy, slightly hyper-real, goodnight sweetheart kind of level sitcom, which is what the show basically ended up as. But I think you're right. It's like they're throwing everything at it, and it's tonally all over the place as a pilot. Yeah. And there are some great little moments because it is very sketchy. Very sketchy. I made in my notes, I kind of noted that opening scene with the whole, the physically impossible walking to the bridge, overtaking the car, that kind of stuff. The pacing of that is really, really similar to some of the early Red Dwarf stuff. There was something about that really reminded me of the pacing, some of the sort of the slightly sillier kind of, hyper-real gags they did in those early episodes. But then the rest of the episode, it doesn't really feel like Red Dwarf. In terms of its pacing and its plot progression, it feels a bit more traditional. But that opening scene with its slightly hyper-real comic violence was the only time that I really felt like, I can see the Red Dwarf guys here. I mean, I think we kind of touched on it a little bit so far, but as an episode, as a standalone episode, did you like it? Like, Mark, did you like it?
I think it has potential, and I would like to be part of our coverage of Series 1 and Series 2 when we look at it for Shipwrecked and Comatose, for sure. I'd be interested to see what they kind of cut, what they focus on, what, like you're saying, there's just so many things that have been thrown at the wall here. Some of it was good, some of it was okay, and some of it really needs to go. So yeah, I'm fascinated by this program, and I'm glad it got picked up. So yeah, we'll see. Looking forward to it.
There's enough here if you were a commissioning editor to go, let's give this a series and see what happens. The thing I kept thinking is, as it was building and building towards the end, because it rattles along in the short time span it has, is it's farce. All these things are happening to this lead character and they're trying to run around. It's a more extreme equivalent of, I've booked myself for 3 Christmas dinners on the same day. What am I going to do? It's very like that, but with a much more extreme edge to it. Well, as much as you can get away with on ITV in the 90s, but
it's a bit more extreme than fucking Dibley.
Oh yeah, it's a bit more extreme than Dibley.
I love Dibley, but it's a bit more extreme.
Yeah, well, if they'd ever done the Dibley After Dark series, that's what we would have had. She does nothing but funerals.
Wow.
Steps in the coffin. We never got that. It was just like too many Christmas dinners.
Was it Baywatch After Dark, where they investigated the paranormal?
Baywatch Nights.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Fucking hell.
Werewolves and aliens. So, Alex, did you enjoy it? Do you think you'll go back to it?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I thought it was just a pilot. I didn't realise it was a series of this. So,
sorry.
No, it's fine. No, I mean, so I may give it a look. I think, it's really interesting, Carl, you're saying about how it is throwing as much at the wall and seeing what sticks, because especially that ending is so, he's stabbed, there's a dead body, there's the client they're trying to get, are the police involved as well? It really is just a really ludicrous,
there's a window smash.
There's such a ludicrous, that's quite an ending for a pilot. That's quite an ending for just an episode. I guess that pilot is sort of maybe taking that kind of thing you would probably have in a series finale or something rather than the first episode kind of thing. I don't know. I think there were some really funny lines in it, and it's quite interesting how in the sort of boardroom, not the boardroom, but like the sort of meeting, they kind of establish each character's kind of traits quite sort of in a not too exposition-y way.
Yeah, I think it's quite a solid scene there, actually.
I think I'm going to nick the line, "You have all the charm of a yeast infection," and use it on professional wrestling commentary. That's one of my jobs.
It's a very good line. And no one else is going to remember it, so you might as well take it. We can mine this pilot for as many lines as we like.
My favourite line in it is, "The only people who are going to see my wife naked are her gynecologist, her masseuse, and in the fullness of time, her embalmer."
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought that was a good line.
It does have lots of those really fun, again, very Red Dwarfy, very kind of late 80s, those kind of like ridiculous similes, that Red Dwarf does so well, Blackadder used to do really well. There are quite a few of those in there, which are really good fun.
So I work in the funeral industry, and I have done for 5 years. You don't get people embalmed in Britain. How many times have you ever been to an open casket? The clue's in the name, open casket, rather than open coffin. It is a almost exclusively American thing. It is very, very difficult to get a body embalmed in this country because Americans are weird. Who wants to see a waxed up version of your dead relative?
I don't know. Might have myself, done the...
No, that's taxidermy. If you have yourself in a pose, that's taxidermy, Carl. I have considered taxidermying my cat when she dies, but I'm not going to do it.
Well, I'm glad you're going to wait.
If I go, Mark, and I get you to do the funeral, I'll have myself stuffed to stand like this, and you have to do the whole service with my arm wreck.
For the benefit of our all audio people, he put a kind of arm round hug kind of pose on the Zoom call. And that is the most morbid thing I've heard for
pointing
at
you
least
as well,
a week.
with a big smile.
As somebody who can see the image in front of me, I have to say I think it's very touching, very beautiful.
But going back to the point, because you're all being fucking ridiculous, this is old. And I think this is what was that telly show about a funeral parlour in America?
6 Feet Under.
That's
6 Feet Under. Yeah, it's long before that.
Yeah, and I thought that was where people got all this embalming fucking obsession from.
Yeah.
But no, this is really, really old, and most people in Britain are cremated, and almost all of the rest are buried. There's no fucking embalming and open coffins, and
I think it's a concept people know enough, like especially if people haven't been to a funeral, had to organise a funeral. I think it's one of those sort of like people know what an embalming is. Yeah. So it's still enough for a good punchline. Yeah. If you've watched any old Hammer horror movies, they talk about embalming and stuff there. So I know what you mean. It's not a thing that we do because we don't.
Although we have,
look at
don't we
waxy.
Don't we have? I mean, they're not embalmed, but is it? Aren't wakes an open coffin number?
No, they've already been burnt by the time you go to the wake. But while you're having your pint of lager, talking about how lovely your granny was, she's in a thing called a crenulator. And do you know what that is? They put what's left after they've burnt the coffin, they put it into a cement mixer with flails in, and they smash the bones so that they become a dust. And that's what's called ashes. While you're having your pint of bitter, saying how lovely your granny was. The funeral industry is fucking wild, and there's no embalming.
I think, though, to be fair to Rob and Doug, if the other person in the scene had responded to the punchline with that information, it just wouldn't have been as funny.
True.
Encourage the knob gag into that, Mark.
Here's the thing, right?
Yeah, stick a knob gag in, something a bit misogynistic, we'd have been away.
Yeah, but embalming is better recognised than crenulation. Which, if you've got granny on your fucking mantelpiece, your granny been crenulated.
You can buy that t-shirt at markadamshumanist.co.uk.
So one of the best things about watching anything is when somebody has information about why something is wrong. So I was watching this. It's kind of like, so I work in the entertainment industry, so I kind of know that as agents, this isn't really how it works. I way prefer having somebody who knows what happens instead of embalming. That's way more fun.
You're welcome.
So I think a strongly worded letter to the Radio Times about this 25-year-old sitcom,
Radio Times,
30-year-old sitcom, in fact. So apart from the inaccuracies, but everyone kind of agrees that it's sort of it's okay. I mean,
Yeah.
like like I say, I watched it, but my lasting memory of it was as something not very good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, it's like I could not tell you a single thing about the Piglet Files, except that I watched it and really didn't like it. And this fell into the same category as me. But actually watching the pilot, despite all the sort of criticisms we've had about the pacing being a little all over the place, I was kind of like, oh, this is better than I remember. And I kind of want to go back and watch the main series, which the main series might be less good. The main series might be a little bit softer, a little bit tamer.
It might lose something by being less chaotic and let's mash everything in as quickly as we can.
That's it. You know, my memory of it was quite a bland sitcom. Like I say, I kept watching because of who made it. So maybe the main series isn't as good. Maybe my memory of it is a bit more accurate.
I watched a couple of episodes of it in research for this, and they do slow the pace down a bit. There's a few more characters added to it, and the main two that make a difference are the two sort of receptionists that are working there. One's like, I'm a bit dotty me, and the other one's the straight woman to that. And they get quite a few lines in it. They get quite a few gags in it, and I think they're kind of used to get from one set piece to another.
Yeah.
And that
I
there
really
seems to be
liked the speed and chaos of this. I think it benefited, and in a lot of Red Dwarf episodes as well, it benefits from breakneck speed towards a final gag with a resolution that takes 20 seconds. And it felt like that, so that is a Red Dwarf comparison, I think. It reminded me of something like, say, Thanks for the Memory in Series 2, where it was, what is this fucking going on? And then all resolved in about 20 seconds. That felt very kind of Rob Grant, Doug Naylor-y to me, at least.
I mean, with this, you could argue that there wasn't really a resolution. The resolution to it was collapsed on the floor and passed out.
Yeah.
Okay, so maybe not resolution, but
A culmination.
culmination, thank you.
Culmination.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. I think that the speed of it really, and also, you know, we've all sort of talked about the opening scene and elements of this that might be a little bit distasteful, especially looking at it now, sort of 30 years later. But I think the speed of it sort of helps you move on from that quickly because it doesn't dwell on anything. You may have a moment where you're like, oh, that's an unpleasant gag, or oh, I don't like this, or even a moment where you're like, that's just not funny. But because it is moving so quickly, it kind of gets you past that, so that you're not necessarily able to forgive it, but you're able to move on quite quickly.
Yeah. I also quite like that these characters, or at least most of them, are pretty terrible human beings.
Yeah.
Like, that kind of, not it makes it okay, but you're kind of like, as you say, it kind of adds to the sort of the fact that some of the humour is like very dark, and as you say, some of the things is very dated and not okay, but it's not like those characters are saying that this, it's not like we're sort of going, well, these are characters we should be looking up to.
Yeah.
They are like especially the guy who's like trying to get with the woman at the funeral.
Yeah.
But he's such an awful prick anyway. It's just kind of quite...
He's so 90s as well.
Yeah.
I've never seen anyone try that at a funeral.
But you've never seen it.
Yeah.
Well, maybe I was
That's it, you've never
concentrating on
seen
the
it.
script.
It's a very American thing.
To be fair, I don't go to the wakes, so maybe they are shagging at the wakes.
You're just watching the bone
That's
cracker.
it,
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, come on,
the
Granny.
So, yeah.
The crenulate. See, Alex learns.
Yeah.
I think that the thing that's interesting with this is that you've got an American there, but the American's not the cool, hip and groovy guy. He's quite sad in a way, which normally it's like, oh, we've got an American. You know, that normally, in a British sitcom, it normally means the American's like big and, you know, heroic in that. Where you've got Atten, who is, he's British, but he's very influenced by American ways in the way he speaks and everything like that. I know the first series is online to watch. I haven't seen the second one anywhere, but he becomes very much the what's the best way? The kind of, he's Chris Morris in the IT crowd almost.
Yeah.
Right.
He comes out with some very odd and morally reprehensible stuff. I think it's very interesting that the American guy is just the sort of, he's just blended in with everybody else.
Yeah.
Especially in the 90s when, you know, we'd only just really got The Simpsons and things like that, where America, it's all cool and hip, and that is like, nah, this guy works in the office. And
America's all cool and hip and has embalming.
yeah.
They love an
They
embalm in
fucking love
America.
it. At least that's what 6 Feet Under taught me. But Carl, you were saying how you thought that series itself was bloated with too many characters once they got past this pilot. I thought this pilot was pretty bloaty when it came to the number of characters it had, actually.
There are quite a lot, yeah.
Yeah, some of the characters in this pilot don't make it to series.
Right.
I was a little bit sad in case of one, because the limo driver doesn't, which is Dennis Lill, who's in Gunman of the Apocalypse.
Oh, I was pleased to see Dennis Lill.
Yeah. No, he's not in the series. He must have got a job in the year in between. And the other actor who sits in the office all day drinking the coffee, he's not in the series either.
Right.
Which I think they gave all the bits that they would have had to the new receptionist that comes in the series. Going back to what Alex said about them being terrible people, though, even the one character who believes she's a good person because she signs, people of worth to the agency, has blatantly got a messiah complex.
True.
Yeah.
Because at one point she says, I saved him, and no, she didn't.
That's it. Well, there's something lovely, isn't there, about a character who thinks they're good and is just as shitty as everyone else.
Yeah.
It's like, it's always fun. And I think it's right that they didn't actually have like a good one.
Yeah, there isn't one good one amongst any of them.
No.
It reminds
similar
me
in
a
A
lot
Prince Among Men as well.
Yeah, Prince Among Men, it did remind me of as well, especially in the terms of, I've mentioned this when we covered Prince Among Men, we're going to have a scene in this office, and in this office, and in this office. I think it was a thing, especially in 90s sitcoms, Rob, you might be able to confirm this for me, is if we're going to do it in an office, we'd better have lots of people in separate offices so we can shoot in different places. And make
almost like
NPCs
in a video game. You see this person in this office, you see this person in this pub, you see this person in this whatever.
I think a successor to this would have been Absolute Power. Which I love. I love Absolute Power.
Yeah.
That has the sort of the satirical edge. Weirdly, I've always thought of Absolute Power, oddly, not to digress, as a kind of a successor to Yes Minister.
Yes.
Weirdly, kind of a contemporary. But I think in terms of actual direct subject matter, you're right. This leads into Absolute Power, which is definitely the better show.
I mean, Yes Minister, I'd say, leads into Absolute Power, the radio series, because they're spin doctors basically in that, aren't they? But for the TV show, they made them entertainment agents. And again, it's that thing we were talking about earlier, is it would have been nice to have real celebrities in this one. In Absolute Power, they kind of have facsimiles of a real celebrity where you kind of go, well, that's so-and-so. Whereas in this, they don't really have the thing. I get the feeling they weren't allowed to mention celebrities because they were talking about like, oh, that new weather girl. Oh, she's going to be the new, and nobody knows her name. Whereas in the like 80s and 90s, like weather girls like Wincy Willis and people like that were celebrities. So it does make me wonder if they mentioned Lizette Anthony and that's it.
Yeah, it's like maybe they're just, it could be that they had a remit not to, or they may have just been playing it safe, especially with the pilot.
I was just about to
maybe
say,
we don't mention anyone.
Is the series, do they mention more celebrities in the series?
Not that I'm aware of. All the celebrities are made up, but again, there's one with Tim Healy, who's basically Roger Cook.
Yeah.
Hosting a Roger Cook show. And I think in the second series, Craig Charles does turn up in one episode, but he's playing someone called Bobby Titan.
Of course he does.
Yeah, but I don't know what it is he's doing in that episode. But there is one in one of the episodes where there's basically a Jimmy Nail facsimile as well.
Yeah.
Is he wearing crocodile shoes?
He's drunk in a underground bar when they find him.
You don't want to be wearing crocodile shoes if you're drunk in an underground bar.
I'll take your word for that one, Mark.
I don't have any crocodile shoes.
Lost them in an underground bar.
I did.
Yeah.
Handing the floor over to our sort of like Red Dwarf experts, how for you does this compare? And I know you've kind of like really got into the kind of the Red Dwarf adjacent shows, but how does this, I mean, I think I know the answer already, but how does this compare next to Red Dwarf sitcom to sitcom?
Not as good. But it's better than Prince Amongst Men, and it's better than Captain fucking Butler.
Oh, a kick in the balls is better than Prince Among Men.
Thank you. Yes.
Prince Among Men is the
I
only
hate
thing
Prince
that
Amongst
Carl
Men,
has
just to put it out there.
that he didn't find some good in. He's very good at finding the good in shit, but he sat there and went, I didn't like this. And I've never seen that before or since. It's amazing.
Stand it. Nothing.
It's so bad.
I've never seen this. I'm intrigued.
Don't.
Don't bother, it's cack.
in the way it's like, oh, there's no redeemable characters in the 10%ers. Prince Among Men, there's no redeemable characters, but you hate them.
Oh, God.
That's fair.
Oh, no.
And it's true. And I don't mind a sitcom about characters that you don't like, but you have to
Not like.
liking it. Whereas in Prince, Captain Butler, I have a bit of a soft spot for it. I don't think it's terrible. It's not good, but it's not terrible. It's one of those shows, if it had maybe, there's something there. There's a sort of a good-natured element to it. Prince Amongst Men, it's just wrong.
Yeah.
It's just, they've just approached it wrong.
Is this before or after the 10%ers?
After.
Okay.
It was after he left Red Dwarf, so it would have been 96, something like that.
Okay.
We got less Rimmer in Series 7 because of Prince Among Men.
Well,
fucking hell.
And that's what really hurts.
Well, I think we remember saying that it was towards the end of him being away, so it's sort of like he did 2 series of Prince Among Men because that's what he was contractually obligated to do. and then it was like, do you want to come back? Actually, I think I'll come back because I think I might have tanked the career.
Oh, I don't know. He did Lara
2
Croft.
Tomb Raider movies.
It was after he came back, though.
Oh, was it?
Yeah.
Oh, right.
Oh, and that was someone different. That was Christopher Barry.
Yeah.
Is that right?
So I think it was a completely different actor.
Right. That's what got me confused. Not that I'm sick.
Yeah, Alex, and what about you? So how up to speed are you with Red Dwarf yourself, Alex?
Oh, I mean,
I talk about having worked on it all the time.
Did you work on Red Dwarf, Rob?
Yeah, funny story, guys. But I don't know if we haven't talked much about how much you've watched it.
I mean, I do love Red Dwarf, but I have not watched it repeatedly enough to be able to talk about it in great depth like I could with shows like Blackadder or Water Towers or Black Books or whatever. But I do love Red Dwarf. Now, again, isn't there a series where there isn't laughter, or there is?
Series 7 doesn't have a laughter track.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Which I remember finding. I mean, I remember finding that a little bit jarring.
Most people did.
Yeah. I actually found the return of it a bit hit and miss. Some episodes I did really like, others I wasn't such a huge fan of.
Yeah, that's the general consensus.
Yeah. I remember like the first series has more drama in it, definitely. Like, I guess it's because it's sort of like getting to know these characters and everything, but it definitely feels like later in the series it gets a little bit more, I don't want to say cartoony, but definitely a bit more silly and ridiculous, whereas in the first series it feels much more grounded.
I think it kind of goes and comes back a little bit to a certain degree. I know what you mean. It's kind of like it's a bit more serious, more dramatic at the beginning. Yeah. In the middle of the kind of the heyday, it is quite, I guess, formulaic, a bit goofy, very, very funny. Yeah. And then as it comes back and gets towards the more recent stuff, it maybe dips into the pathos a bit more.
Yeah.
But, I mean, you've proven your credentials, Alex. You're allowed to talk about it. Right? How does it stand up? Like 10%ers versus Red Dwarf. I mean, it's a stupid question.
Yeah, it is a stupid question.
It's like, this doesn't even touch the edges, does it? But it's like...
no, I mean, 10%ers was not as bad as I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be. But the other thing as well was I didn't... Because you said, it's a pilot for the Red Dwarf people, I immediately thought in my head it was a sci-fi thing. Because also there are loads of like sci-fi podcasts and like audio dramas that are all called like the something percent and the other percent and the 1%. Yeah. And I thought, this is another thing. I had no idea it was anything to do with talent agents. So it was actually quite a surprise. I kind of, that beginning scene with him and his wife, I kind of thought, all right, so are the aliens going to come down and take you away or something? Like, is this, like, I really genuinely thought it was going to go into a sci-fi thing. And then suddenly we get into a talent agency. And then I'm like, the 10%ers, right, okay.
Yeah, up to the commercial break and going, but when are you going to get to space?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Is the 10% a reference to agents taking 10% of their... I thought it was.
Because Call My Agent, the original title of it in France is 10%. And then they did the remake over here and they called it 10%.
That's the Jack Davenport one, isn't it?
Yeah, which wasn't bad. I mean, I love the French one so much. It's brilliant. And what is brilliant about that is they get big, like, French stars to come and be in it, and it's not even like a cameo, it's like they have a whole episode devoted to them. So you'll have Jean Reno and Juliette Binoche and Isabelle Huppert completely taking the piss out of themselves, and it's
I mean, I was going to ask
brilliant.
if it was Gerard Depardieu or Eric
not
Cantona. They're the only French stars I know.
No, it's not. No, not quite at their level. But
Does
pretty
Julie
high
Delphi
level.
count as French?
She is, but she is not in it, which is surprising because I think she would have been really good in it. But it's that thing of like, it's really funny because they are actual like French film stars, just completely. And the 10% one that we did over here was okay, but the celebrities that they got here were ones that have been trotted out in these, let's get these actors playing themselves again and again. It was like, it's Helena Bonham Carter and Dominic West. It's just kind of like, yeah, we've seen this.
It did feel a bit like sort of, who else has got a deal with Amazon at the moment?
Yeah. Oh my god, yeah, definitely. Sorry, I digress. The 10%ers it was funnier than I thought it would be. I thought it was going to be like really dated and bad, but actually it made me laugh more than I thought it would.
I feel like we're all kind of on the same page with that. Yeah. It was better than we expected. And I think it still falls into the same category as the Captain Butlers,
It's not as bad as that.
The So Haunt Me's. It's like, no, I mean, it's tighter than that.
I'm going to have to watch Captain Butler now. You've talked about it too much. I'm going to have to like...
It's one of those ones, it looks so Channel 4 and it looks like it's basically got one set.
It did have one set.
Yeah.
It's like really cheap looking.
Great.
Spoiler, it was a fucking boat.
Thing is with that, in the same way that we said, like in this, it's like you've got the office that's all split up and you can go from room to room. Same as you had that with Principal Men. At least you could leave the office and go to the house or something like that. Captain Butler didn't really seem to have many rooms on the boat.
No.
So you were either on the deck.
It was a tiny boat.
Yeah, you were either on the deck or occasionally you were in like one room on the boat. And that was it, really.
I feel like they had a little bit of beach sometimes, didn't they?
That was one
Like a little bit of
episode
beach.
where he got seduced by evil mermaid, wasn't it?
And the sky and the sea was like, that's a blue sheet, isn't it? That's really...
wow.
The sellotape on the fishing line trick.
The episode where he was seduced by a mermaid, you did get to see Craig Charles's bottom. That was the highlight of the entire series.
That was the highlight of the entire 90.
Going back to the funeral thing, right, I've got a bit of a beam up on it.
Are you waiting for Craig Charles? Are you already on the list?
Oh, that was a terrible segue, but...
Waiting for
I
Craig.
was really annoyed, right, that it was actually accurate at one point. I did a ceremony earlier today and some fucker's phone went off. That still happens 30 years later, every time. And do you know what the worst thing is? Guess whose phone went off at my mum's funeral? Mine!
Your mum.
Fucking phones at fucking funerals.
I think you're allowed at your own mum's funeral.
No, I'm not.
You probably had other things on your mind. You know what you should have done? You should have answered it and just gone, Mum? Just to mess with everyone. Just to mess with everyone. That's how I would have handled that situation.
I've never heard my dad say the word cunt before, but I think if I'd done that, that would have been the one time he'd have sort of called me that.
Well, the one time you heard him.
But yeah, 30 years on, people's fucking phones going off every fucking ceremony. There's always one.
Isn't that a crazy gag, though? Because mobile phones were so... Hardly anyone had them in those days.
Fair.
It was a very... Agents were the kind of people who would have them. So that, back in 1993... That was a new gag. No one had seen that before. It's like, oh, that's hilarious. The phone.
When did Don Jolly do that gag with the gigantic phone?
That was like late 90s, early 2000s.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I
I think it's like 2000. But that's a really good point. Yeah, only the like yuppies had mobile phones.
It was a very unusual. So obviously people even more so, like, you know, without sort of like pandering to your ego, Mark. It's like what happened to you is like not that unusual now, and people can make allowances, make exceptions. Back then, that just doesn't happen.
True. Good point.
It's like added comedy value in there. So were there any other like big gags that you liked? Obviously, I don't know whether you liked that joke or it just brought back horrible memories.
I really liked the bit at the end where the police person comes in. There was like, oh, are you the suicide? No, I'm the stabbing. Suicide.
That was a good gag.
That was a good.
Just past the office with the shagging going on and past the next one that's covered in blood.
Brilliant.
It just sums up the whole episode nicely.
That is a good gag.
I was fond of Joan, who's at it 5 times a day. And in my notes I wrote, even I'm not that bad.
Was she the one who was like trying to get off with the younger?
Yeah.
Yeah.
She's got an 18-year-old lover Was it her knees haven't met in 4 months?
Subtle humour, that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean,
This
it's
was
quite
pretty horny, actually, this whole thing.
It was quite
was
Yeah,
pretty
yeah,
horny.
it really was.
Yeah, well, again, isn't it? It's like see what sticks,
Yeah.
so to speak.
Well,
Lol.
So, like, you know.
I remember the guy actually says, I'd have you on the coffin, didn't he? Like,
Yeah.
Well, again, it's this, like...
Not something
slightly
I've seen
dark.
working for 5 years in the funeral industry, just to be clear.
Not
Not
yet.
saying it doesn't happen. I'm just saying I've not done it and I've never seen
Not
it.
on your watch.
I mean, it's maybe this is the thing is this is when they were having issues like Doug Naylor's like, Rob's not here. What am I going to do? Just throw shagging in it. Throw shagging in it.
You know what it is? It's because they had, like, umpteen years of Red Dwarf
Yeah.
where they had very little shagging.
Yes.
And now they're kind of like, they're both just horny.
Well, Red Dwarf was
Like, they were
a
desperately
sausage
wanting
fest.
to write more shagging in Red Dwarf.
Yeah, a massive sausage fest.
Yeah, and not in the good
It's
way.
interesting when I'm talking about how this compares to Red Dwarf in that you kind of go, well, it wasn't that good, but then you remember that it is Rob and Doug, and then you have the moment of like, oh, there they are, when like a particularly good
Yeah.
gag comes through or something like that. It's like, there they are. Because some of the acting in this, even though it's funnier than I remember it being, some of the acting in this is diabolical.
Not great.
Yeah, it's some of them are just
It's
really odd.
it's, I mean, I know we're talking about a pilot and obviously, you know, everyone's finding their feet and stuff, but it is a real mixed bag. Absolutely, there are moments in it, especially those kind of like silly similes. I thought the board meeting scene in particular, where you kind of go, that's Doug, that's Rob, there they are. It's like you absolutely see that.
Yeah.
But yes, some of the line delivery does not help.
Well,
does not help the script.
wife was pretty over the top, wasn't she?
Yeah, again, it's this kind of like this comic book caricature thing of like she's almost in a different sitcom
Yeah.
with this guy, those big over the top accent. It's like and that in itself just isn't funny.
Yeah. No.
You know, we're already talking about the physical violence of it, whether that's funny or not. Like that kind of angry, you know, generic, foreign, sexy trophy wife thing. Even then, it's just that's not.
And it's so
funny.
weird how that's the opening scene. Like if you were, I don't know, if you were writing a show about, you know, a talent agency, a theatrical, you know, agency or whatever, wouldn't you begin the first scene at the agency,
Yeah.
maybe?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Than in this guy's house with his just this really bizarre scene.
That opening scene, too much of that is setting up for the closing scene. And the closing scene, I would argue, you know, kind of works in that kind of culmination, the crescendo of sequence. And again, what Clive was saying, that great line of, you know, oh no, I'm the stabber.
Of course, yeah.
But because they wanted that as the ending, they kind of had to put that domestic violence scene as the opening scene. But you're right, it doesn't work as an opening scene. It works in terms of the progression up to that finale. This is where like a David Renwick would do so much more with the concept. That kind of working backwards from a closing scene. And it's almost like they worked backwards, putting all the pieces in place, and then went, oh, where do we put the angry wife?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just stick her at the beginning. At the beginning. It's really, as much as it made me, you know, laugh properly quite a few times, it is a mess.
Yeah.
I mean, it has the thing for me of it's blatantly a pilot opening graphics.
Yeah.
If we get a series, we'll put a bit more money into it. But at the moment, we spent it all on sets.
The theme tune was pretty generic,
Can't even
sitcom-y
remember
as
it.
well.
No, I don't.
Yeah.
I know it
It's just-
changes for the
No,
series.
it's that sort of 90s sort of like a little bit of sax, kind of like do 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 sort of thing, wasn't
It
it?
was
Can't
okay.
even remember it.
That's a good sax
there.
impression, Rob.
That I swallowed a saxophone this morning.
Yeah, it was a good sax impression, actually.
It's probably something Howard did for Red Dwarf, and he's gone, well, we didn't use it. If we use a snippet of it, you know, for this pilot, no one will see it, Howard. Don't worry about it. We won't pay you.
It definitely had the sound of like library track about
Yeah,
it.
definitely.
Talking about the mobile phone gag and how that was sort of relatively new, I'd forgotten about it, but there's some stuff about comic book movies in this 30-year-old film where they're basically kind of, it's the same conversation, the same jokes about comic book movie, where they want to get one of their actors in a comic book movie and the guy's like, well, it's not real acting, which goes to show that everyone on Twitter is just regurgitating the same conversation they've had for the last 30 years.
Yeah.
It is fun how these things come back around again. Because if we think about superhero movies in 1993, we're talking like Captain America,
Howard the Duck.
Howard the
Howard
Duck,
the Dog.
No, how did even earlier than that? I mean, 93, I suppose you're looking at what? It would be
It'd be-
Schumacher's first Batman?
Yeah, I was going to say Batman Returns was 92. 92?
92, yeah.
So we haven't even gotten to bat nipples yet.
No, we haven't even hit Schumacher yet. So weirdly, they're making jokes about superhero movies being shitty when they're sort of at a point where they're still really good.
Well, you say that. Howard the Duck was the first cinematically released film by Marvel.
It was.
Wow.
Yes.
But Howard the Duck in what?
But
I want to say
it was
88,
nearly...
which is only 5 years prior to this.
I think it was it not like 86 or something? But also Howard the Duck is brilliant, so it doesn't come into this
Howard the Duck
equation.
is fucking wild. Like, within the first
Howard the
30
Duck
seconds...
is ridiculous.
Yeah, within the first 30 seconds, Duck Tits. Who
Yeah.
was that film for?
I love Howard the
I
Duck.
might watch that tonight.
Such a mess.
It's an absolute mess.
But amazing soundtrack. So I mean, we've talked around in circles. Do you guys have any final thoughts? I feel like it's final thoughts time in a Jerry Springer. I was going to say Jerry Lewis kind of way, but not that guy. In a Jerry Springer kind of way. Any kind of like final thoughts on this? Like, where do we feel it stands? How well is it aged? I mean, what are your thoughts, Mark?
Not aged very well. Funny.
No.
And I'm stealing. You have all the charm of a yeast infection. 6 out of 10.
Clive, how about for you? What are your final thoughts?
I think it's a show that showed potential. I think, again, a 6 out of 10 is a pretty solid one. I think if given more time, I'm going to watch the rest of the series now because I'm interested to see how it turns out. But I think given more time and a bit more fleshing out of characters and given slightly more of a level, I think it could be something quite good. But because it's 1993... or 94 by the time the series comes out, I don't think they've got that in their heads that they want to do that. Why do that when we can give them a much nicer jacket?
What about you, Alex?
Yeah, I'd say 6 out of 10 is also a good number. It's because I didn't know there was a series to this. I'm quite intrigued to check it out, but I know it'll be one of those things that takes me ages to do because whilst I am intrigued, I'm not like dying to find out. But yeah, at some point, if I'm at a loose end, I might try and give it a look because I'd be interested to see where it goes. But yeah, it's quite. I very much agree with the opinion that it is throwing as much at it as possible to try and work out what the hell this is and who it's for.
I mean, I don't have anything contentious or contradictory to add to any of that. I think.
Are you giving it a 6 out of 10?
Well, this is a thing. I want to like just to keep it interesting. I'll give it 6.5. There we go. Just to shake it up. But it's like absolutely on the money. As someone who watched it and literally has no memory of it other than thinking it wasn't very good, going back to the pilot, I'm like, actually, I kind of want to go and give it another watch because you're all right. There's potential there, and obviously it didn't become an absolute new classic. It got 2 series, which a lot of things do, and then it sort of disappeared, and then, Doug spent, 10 years trying to make Red Dwarf again. So it obviously didn't become a new bona fide classic, but I think it's, on the basis of the pilot, I think it's okay. And I'm quite keen to maybe give it a rewatch properly. It hasn't aged well. I don't think, without having watched more episodes, rewatched more episodes, I don't think it's going to fix that.
No.
Some things, we talk about it a lot on You Have Been Watching, that some things you can watch them and you can take into account the context of when they were made.
Yeah.
And you can see that some shows were trying to do things or trying to say things and maybe just missed the mark, or some jokes were just too sort of like topical in terms of attitudes. And there's a little bit of that here, but I also think that it's not Doug and Rob's most sensitive writing generally. I think that Red Dwarf, made in the years before this, and stuff that they've both done after this, novels and TV and stuff, all shows a greater sort of sensitivity and a sort of a greater, I'm trying not to be pretentious about it, but they're both sort of like nicer and kinder. And I think that this is, there's a streak of nastiness in here, in this pilot, which really doesn't age well. Not just sort of like set jokes and stuff. As much as I enjoyed the slightly darker edge that I'd forgotten about, I wasn't expecting. So I don't think it ages well, and I don't think you can even look at it in context and go, actually, it's sort of okay, we let that slide. I think even at the time, it was a bit nastiness. There was a little bit of an edge to it. But I'd still recommend people giving it a go. Maybe going straight to the series first and coming back to this afterwards might be a fun way to do it. But yeah, I think I didn't hate watching it again, and I'm going to give it another go. So thanks for joining us for this very special episode of We Have Been Shipwrecked and Watching Comatose, or whatever we want to call it.
Nailed it.
Next time, Alex and I will be back in our own little bubble universe, and Mark and Carl will be back in theirs. But until then, where can people find you, Mark? Where can people find out what you're doing and what you're saying and thinking?
If you want to find Shipwrecked and Comatose, at Red Dwarf Pod on Twitter. And I also do a podcast called Chucky Vision, which is about child's play and Chucky and killer dolls and horror and gayness. At Chucky Vision on Twitter. And if you fancy either of those two, you can find them both on whatever podcast app you're listening to this episode.
And Carl, where can the people find you?
You can find me at allmylinks.com/Mr. Carl, and that's the unabbreviated MISTER. There's bits and bobs up there, also links to Shipwrecked, links to things I've done previously, and what I'm up to at the moment. I'm doing quite a bit of ring announcing at the moment, so you'll probably see my adventures going up and down the Midlands shouting men in pants names.
I mean, I do that too, so we're both... yeah, maybe the only podcast that's about Red Dwarf that has 2 wrestling ring announcers on it.
That's impressive.
I know, right?
That's your claim
That's the
to
USP,
fame.
yeah.
Because ironically enough, both Alex and I are wrestling ring announcers.
Brilliant.
Alex, where can people find you? What are you up to?
People can find me on Twitter, I suppose, at AlexJR.Lynch. You could also find a podcast I host called Out of Character, where I speak to sketch and character comedians and writers. That's at OO Character Pod. And my latest venture, which I would love you all to check out, is at Terror Tapes Pod. And that is Ramon Fear's Terror Tapes, which is a horror comedy anthology, which I co-write and co-produce. Yeah, that's me.
And I'm just plain old Twitter, where I am Forducks, which is FORDUCKS. Whatever I'm working on or planning on, I pimp it out there, promote it out there. Also, we'll put all the links for you have been watching in the notes for this. So remember, we're part of the We Made This Podcast Network. Please subscribe to You Have Been Watching and Shipwrecked and Comatose if you already haven't. Give us both a rating and review on Apple Podcasts, as we really do appreciate it, and we're brilliant. And if you want to help out the network at all, you can consider supporting us on Patreon if you go to patreon.com/WeMadeThis. Obscure 90s sitcoms are not all we're discussing, though, so we'll give you a little taste of what you might have missed on the network in a moment. But until next time, you have been listening to Alex Lynch.
Goodbye.
Mark Adams.
See ya.
Carl Bryan.
Farewell.
And me, Robert Turnbull. And we're all off to throw our record collections on a corpse.
And no fucking embalming.
Crenulators all the way.
Cremulator.
Shipwrecked and Comatose, a Red Dwarf podcast, was created and produced by Mark Adams and Kurt North. You can find us on Twitter at Red Dwarf Pod, and we are part of the We Made This Podcast Network.
Hello everyone, I'm Robert Turnbull, producer and co-host of You Have Been Watching, a podcast that takes a deep dive into the world of British sitcom. I and my co-host Alex Lynch take you on a journey through the weird and wonderful world of British sitcoms, looking at a range of different subjects and different shows, including classics like Fawlty Towers. In the same way as David Brent and Alan Partridge and Victor Meldrew, Basil works best, for me, when he is actually dealing with arseholes. The more forgotten oddities like The Asylum.
I don't know if I was necessarily a fan of it. It was a bit kind of... If I'd seen that on the Paramount Comedy Channel when I hadn't known who any of these people were, I probably wouldn't have necessarily enjoyed it.
And we even have top 10s like favourite sitcom theme tunes, or episodes dedicated to a subject like the quirk of recasting in sitcoms. Weirdly, I feel like the examples that I've been able to find of like properly recasting characters, like bringing new actors in to play the same characters, they tend to be bad sitcoms that didn't last very long. So do please come and give us a listen on the We Made This Network. We're available on all podcast platforms and on Twitter at YHBW Pod. So come and give us a follow, give us a listen, send us a comment, and let's all have a laugh.